let's talk about something without which no country can develop.
Yeah.
It's a sine qua non, without which not, education.
Yeah.
And I want to start with you, Dr. Clement Apaak, because that is where you have one more article. So let's start from there. You're on the Education Committee of Parliament.
That's correct.
I want you to give me an overview. We've seen 5 years, thereabouts, of an Akufo-Addo administration. What would be your reading of our gains and our losses in education? Because it cannot be all losses. There must be gains. And it cannot be all gains. There must be losses. What have been the gains and the losses that you see in the system before we get to a flagship program like Free SHS and all that has been said about it?
Well, it will be difficult to give a generic response to your question. Because as you know, there are different tiers of the educational structure.
So you would have to cite
we have basic,
necessarily...
we have secondary,
right,
and we have tertiary. If you take basic, for example, I would say that in the last 5 years, basic education has suffered. Basic education has suffered largely because of government's fixation on the free senior school policy and its success. Because, you know, it's a product of political activity and discourse. So if you look at the funding, in the last 5 years, while the funding for secondary education has appreciated, the funding for basic education has been stagnant and at best gone down.
Right.
Tertiary has suffered similarly. So there is no, if you like, equity in the last 5 years in terms of supporting holistically all the different tiers of our education. As I speak, you know, one of the biggest issues we face in the basic educational sector is the fact that government is yet to make available textbooks based on a new curriculum that it introduced almost about 3 years ago. And why that has not happened, in spite of many assurances by the minister in response to questions that we have asked in Parliament, is so breathtaking. And the other area is also the arrears owed in terms of remitting what we call the capitation grant. And these are the grants that go to the headmasters for them to buy things like chalk, markers, registers. It's in areas of 4 tranches. And so
which is how long, basically?
This would be going back to, I think, 2019, that the capitation grants have not been remitted. So many headmasters have had to borrow to buy. Teachers have had to use their own monies to buy material that ought to be provided by the state. And so this is affecting teaching and learning at the basic level. These are only 2 of the many issues. So
how do you feel, and let's stick to the basic level for a bit, how do you feel that has affected basic education apart from these? Has it affected the outcomes? I mean, we've seen students sit the BECE, for example, which is the highest point at the basic level. I mean, I know there have been the changes in terms of what is basic education and all of that, but if we're sticking to what the old basic system has been, has it affected the outcomes in terms of the performances at the BECE and the rest? Because we must weigh it with some standard.
Well, in terms of the numbers, naturally, as the population is increasing, there would always be bigger numbers coming from the base to the middle and to the tertiary, all things being equal. The issue is the quality. But even evaluating the quality has been a subject of debate. What standard do we use? Who does the evaluation? Is it state actors or non-state actors? What is the benchmark, or if you like, the starting point? And that is why some of us are even calling for some investigation into WAEC-administered exams. Because the outcome of BECE and SSC-CE is a bit questionable in terms of the level of performance. We know about the leakages. We know about the leakages of papers, exam
usually
practices.
It's just a drop in the bucket.
No, that is what
it reflective on the total, you know?
That is what I'm saying, the quality. But the quality is difficult to determine. The quality can only be determined by an independent assessor. But if I am to use my own standard, which is my conversations with colleagues who are still lecturers at the universities, they indicate that the quality has gone down. We have students who have entered the universities with good grades.
Right.
But they are struggling to survive in the university.
They simply can't perform.
So that indirectly raises a question about the quality of the secondary system that propel them into the tertiary.
But this is a West African setup. So are you then, questioning the quality of our education across the spectrum, across the West African sub-region? And when you speak of an assessor, so are you one of those then who think that beyond WAEC, there should be another entity that, for example,
yes, I have not been satisfied.
Sort of either, maybe not supervises, but sort of investigates or interrogates the work of WAEC?
No, I get your point, but on the earlier part of your question, WAEC is a West African sub-regional examining body.
Right.
But WAEC is also
country.
decentralized.
Right.
So we have the Ghana office of WAEC, for example, which actually receives budgetary support from government of Ghana. Every year, WAEC comes to the Committee of Education to present its estimates, and they get, depending on what they request and what we can offer, anywhere between 10 million to 15 million, 70 million, thereabout. Now, because WAEC is also decentralized, WAEC Ghana is autonomous to some extent, and that is why WAEC Ghana can decide that in consultation with government of Ghana, we are going to go ahead and examine our students who have reached the stage of writing their terminal exams at BEC or SSE, and WAEC Nigeria would also adopt a different approach depending on the local conditions.
Right.
And
I get that.
So the point I'm trying to make is that it is not generic. So we cannot use our standards to measure the standards in Nigeria. We can do the comparisons here and there. So we must also find our own way of evaluating the quality of the students who go through these terminal examinations, and whether the grades that they are assigned them are truly reflective of their abilities.
And from where you said,
questions are being raised.
The discussions you had
with lecturers,
even with university dons.
They are beginning to raise questions, and some are even beginning to suggest that perhaps if the system does not improve,
right,
and I believe it's been exacerbated by government's policy of procuring and distributing past examination questions and examiners' reports to the students. That in itself does not augur well for vigorous academic activity and commitment. So what we ought then to be doing now is to critically examine where the gaps are, the shortfalls are, and if that means to investigate WAEC in terms of the leakages of practices, who is in charge, how the exam papers leak, then we can prescribe the way forward. So whilst I am not satisfied with the conduct of WAEC in these matters, I also don't subscribe to the radical view that we should bring in a competitor. That should only come after we have conducted some investigation. And if my motion...
But if for all these decades we've seen these things happen time and again.
No, but they have been exacerbating.
When are we going to...
They have been exacerbating. The quantum of malpractices and leakages, incidentally, has increased astronomically with the beneficiaries of the free senior school policy coming on stream. Very strange.
Is this factual?
Well, that is my observation. I can be proven wrong.
Not factual.
But the point I am making is that we can only think about bringing in a competitor if we conduct a proper investigation. I filed a private member's motion. He knows.
Okay.
It has been admitted to investigate these things for the last 10 years, 2011 to 2021. So we can have a broad enough parameter and then formulate adequate and far-reaching responses. So that would be my approach.
Okay, so hold it right there. I'll come back to you on
So I've only spoken on basic and
I'm fully aware of that.
Secondary.
Secondary.
We've not even talked about tertiary.
I'll come back to the secondary and
Very well.
the tertiary. But I know you have a take on some of the matters that have been mentioned, especially when it comes to WAEC as well. We've all been through that system. What's your take?
Well, I'm of a different school of thought. First of all, I think our education leadership, not the ministry, but
Right.
the leadership needs some retooling.
Education leadership.
Leadership, and I'm talking about the institution.
Right.
Talking about the ministry. I'm talking about university level, and I'll talk from my experience in the medical field.
When you say the ministry, I know you'll get to the, but from the ministry, where is it? The technocrats?
Yes, I mean the technocrats. Because I'm of the school of thought that our institutions need to work well, regardless of who our minister becomes, so that if the ministries or the institutions in Ghana are robust, there'll be almost minimal adverse impact of a bad leadership.
Right.
At the
So you have the right structure. So regardless of who is at the helm of affairs, it doesn't change much.
And I always say that the one thing former President Obama left with us when he was here was that let your institutions work.
Yeah.
And
we don't need strong men. We need strong institutions.
Exactly. And I really think that education institutions have to wake up to that. And you know, I'm always concerned about one thing. Our Ghanaian students excel so well in foreign domains, and yet they are marked down so badly by our professors and lecturers in this country.
But a lot of them will tell you that when they are in our jurisdiction, it is learning by rote. In other words, Baba. Chew, pour, pass, and forget. And so the application is not there. That is why you can have a lot of them, you know, unless it is very technical, like accounting or something where it is in a certain box and you have to operate within that box. Beyond that, they are found floundering. But when they get into other jurisdictions and then they are able to add their baba, so to speak, to the practicality, then they excel.
Even our professors themselves usually have a huge lack in terms of industrial experience. And that is one problem I have with our academic society here. Elsewhere, your business professor has run maybe 2 corporations before coming to teach. But we're in a country where we major always in the minors, you know, where we don't add credence to the fact that this man might not necessarily be a PhD, but per his wealth of business experience, he's best suited to handle an entrepreneurial class. And this is the thinking that we need to, you know, the likes of Steve Jobs would never have been admitted to University of Ghana to come and lecture. But look at what he's done in terms of transformation. The likes of Bill Gates would have said no, 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 no. But this is somebody who's done things that have impacted the whole world. You understand? So I really think that
he still is a Harvard dropout.
But let me tell you one thing. This is where we are mistaken. The likes of Bill Gates, okay? Bill Gates topped all of his classes to the extent that I can tell you that he realized that his professors were not up to task. I mean, that is a different school of thought. So I need to posit and make it clear here.
Right.
The likes of Steve Jobs went to very top, academic schools, and he outperformed in those schools. You know, where, I mean, Charlie, we're talking about like the Einsteins, you understand? And for instance, speaking of Einstein, he was usually last in the kind of school he went to, mind you. So I really think that our education system is not transforming appropriately with the times in terms of the industry.
So we're still stuck in the past, basically.
That gap between industry and academia is so much wider. And I think that, and I hope that we sway away from, you know, just grades to practicality, and look at what happened with even our brilliant science and maths quiz people. I mean, I remember it's been the argument, we know all the wolo, but in practice we are bad. And I think that our way of examining students in this country has to change. I've done calculus outside, and I've done calculus in Ghana, and trust me, world of difference in terms of how the professors.
Same thing, different approach.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
You know,
so that gives a lot of.
And there's one thing he says, which I want him to look at. Listen, when I was in SS, we were doing A-level abort exams. No, I mean that is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And using exam approach to learn is not as bad as some professors think, because it gives you a better roadmap. And I did better using questions to learn than to just go and read and think that I comprehend, only to go and hit a question and you're like, Charlie, I know the seat up. So I really think that using the exam cum studying approach is no fault.
So a blend of them is not a problem. Quick one, because I want us to get into free as it is heavy. No, I thought you had a quick reaction.
Well, what I'm saying is that he is raising issues around the structure and the lack of linkage between academia and industry.
Absolutely.
If I hear,
It's a huge problem in this.
but I know, at least, I don't know of all fields, but I know that in as far as the business school is concerned, even when I was a student,
Which one? University of Ghana?
University of Ghana Business School,
Right.
they had a program where they brought in industry players to lecture. I even know, for example, that the former finance minister under the Setekwe, he lectures there, and a number of people like that. Perhaps what we need to do is to accentuate it.
But that again is a drop in the ocean.
I mean,
we may need.
I'm not disagreeing with
We need the Casa Precos.
Right.
So I'm not disagreeing with him.
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that it is there somewhat, but perhaps we need to.
And they downgrade us too much. I mean, professors are happier when students fail, I think.
Unfortunately, the academic culture in Ghana.
I feel that is unfair. I mean, I don't think it's something to generalize.
No, I mean,
you could say that there are a few of them, and we've sat in classes where some will tell you that in this class that you are.
An A is a no-no.
Some of them will tell you that so many will get Fs and all of that. I mean, that is not your reality.
Please, I'm here. I was teaching one of them. So these things directly impact me. You understand?
It's too bad. It's too bad.
Every nation has its academic culture. It's not different from what happens in the area of, the justice delivery system. We have our academic culture. And so whilst many of us have even trained abroad, myself included, when you come back home to teach in Ghana, at the University of Ghana, there is a certain academic culture.
So there are parameters you must fit.
They can tell you here, you have to fill them. You have many challenges.
And all of these are also dictated by certain environmental and cultural factors. So it's not that we are too hard on
I get the different dynamics. There are so many of them, but what I see, so many loose ends that we must tie, because he's making a lot of sense.
I agree.
So are you. So whether it is the structure,
but we are not too hard
or the
harsh.
leadership, or the educational system itself, we must address certain things. But let's look at free SHS. For you, from where you sit, 5 years on, or some 4 years on, has it lived up to its billing? Free SHS?
No.
Why not?
I say no because it is a process. And I say no because government
has to some point in the
process. I say no because we have not had a review, which some has.
And I was about to get to that.
Some have defined as council. But when you implement a program of this magnitude, with the goals and objectives that you profit to justify the coming into being of the program, and yet you are adamant in allowing a review of the program, how then do observers or other stakeholders draw a conclusion as to whether the program has met the purpose for which it came into place or not? So, simply put, one of the reasons why I can't say yes is because there is no standard to evaluate.
When you look at the grades that of the scores that students have had or attained in the free SHS period, what do they reveal to you? But I mean, is it a plus or a minus?
The score is not enough to evaluate a program.
No, but are the scores positive?
The scores are positive and have gone up because naturally the student population, the number of students, have also gone up. Government has also made a conscious effort to support students to do well. And that is
which is not a bad thing, is it?
But that was not happening in the past. So what I'm trying to say is that given the nature of this program, the kinds of interventions made, the resources put in place, even though I disagree because those resources could have been applied in a different way to help the students in terms of spending 68 million in 2 years to bypass examination questions and examiners' reports. Remember, this was not happening before.
Right.
So how then do you use a system that is benefiting from all of these and its output?
But that is the difference in approach, isn't it? So that is the difference in approach.
So what I'm saying is that
it could have been done, it wasn't done.
It wasn't done.
And now it can be done, and it's being done.
So it won't be fair to use this as a standard of judgment of what was happening before.
The intervention is part of the change.
I have not argued. But that change perhaps is the reason why people may think that more students are passing than before.
I mean, I do know that when you look at the hard numbers,
It's what
year
I'm
on
saying.
year, when you look at the hard numbers, for example,
And I have the figures.
I think the one that came through, was it this year or last year?
I have the
was
figures.
worse in some areas where
Yes,
we
maths and
so
English.
It goes
Almost about
back and
50%
forth.
of students
Right.
couldn't take their places in tertiary institutions because they failed in the core subjects, particularly maths and English.
Let me ask you something, a quick thought that comes to mind very quickly, both of you. There is this thinking as well that, for over a long time, mathematics, English have held some people. Sometimes, I've seen people who have scored A's and everything else, but in mathematics maybe they fail or something. What do you think about that? Does it make sense, that entire system we've developed? In other jurisdictions, when you go to Germany, especially for those who go through the middle route, the vocational and all of that, right from scratch, they're beginning to find out where your strengths are, your core areas, and they align you
appropriately.
Yeah. Not everyone is mathematics inclined. Not everyone is as linguistic as I am. But we seem to put everybody in one box. Everybody must fly when everybody is not a bird.
Very bad.
Your quick take.
I think that, it's beautiful that you can do history in America and be a medical doctor, or do English and be a lawyer. And I really think that it actually adds value to the entire, college. And our thinking is still too archaic. I have to be very blunt about it. And we need to wake up and you might not necessarily be very strong in math, but you might be the best literature student. And literature is also education. And literature also, guides your mind. And I've been in some jurisdiction where board members come from a varied background and they add so much value to the board decision making. And you'll be so amazed by the fact that literature helps governance more so than a lot of, math. In the sense that it guides you, your temperaments, your behavior, and some of the things that we are lacking in this country in terms of discipline, in terms of appreciating our own culture, has a lot to do with also the lack of respect for folklore. And these are things we're missing in our educational system.
Because those stories teach you something fundamental about who we are.
And that's why for any business person, I'll choose your values, then I look at your grades.
Right. We're not digressing from the SHS convo, but this just came in. What is your take on that? We make it as though if you didn't succeed or pass in mathematics and English, you were daft.
Well, I agree that we need to take a second look at that. We need to be a lot more flexible in opening avenues where students can excel without being encumbered because they are deficient in one subject or the other. So that I agree, and I know. There's been a lot of reforms being talked about. Some of them are ongoing. If there is the one thing that this minister likes most is to talk about reforms. Some of us even think that there are too many things happening at the same time. Right. And when that happens, it clouds the direction.
Right.
So yes, reforms are good, but he needs to slow down a bit.
Okay.
Almost this every 2 to 3 months, an announcement of some changes, some reforms. It's not helpful. It creates confusion. Right. But I agree. And I know that in conversations with the minister at committee, some of these issues have come up.
Right.
I know he, by and large, trained in the US.
Right.
So if you look at the way he's steering us, he's trying to bring on board some of the, I would say, positive aspects of American education.
And we are working hard to maintain what we have.
Our current system and the way it is structured, some of those reforms cannot easily
be adapted,
be given effect. So there is a conflict between the status quo and change.
Modernization.
Which we have to deal with. So in principle, I agree that students ought not to truncate their education because they are deficient in math.
So that's why
the avenues for them to proceed, even if they don't get the requisite grades in those 2 subjects, whilst they get the needed help to bring them up to that appreciable level. That can even happen at the university level. Right. So all these are options that
in some instances there are pre-university, in other jurisdictions which aid that cause. But you were talking about a review of free SAT.
Yes.
Quick take.
Well, yes, because you see, since the program came into being, some issues have emerged in terms of even matters to do with the infrastructure, which then compel government to adopt what we describe as the obnoxious double-track policy. And that policy in itself also has issues. The length of time that students spend at
It has
home.
now been done away with.
No, the first years, those who have entered year one are the ones who we have been told are not
course, those
going
in the
to.
system, so it's being
those in
phased
second
out.
and third year, they are still in it.
Yeah.
But I have received complaints from headmasters that in spite of the slight augmentation in terms of infrastructure, it is still not sufficient for government to have decided that those who are entering year one, who are in year one now, should not go through the double track process. So they are currently being squeezed in terms of space. So there's an issue there that we need to look at. So the issue of space is still one that is outstanding. Then the other issue had to do with arrangements for feeding. Previously, it was the headmasters, the managers of the institutions, usually with the headmaster, the bearer, the dining hall prefect. They will sit down and look at the menu and then plan and decide. Now it has been centralized. The food is supplied by buffer stock suppliers.
Right.
So the schools don't have a say in terms of the quantity, the type of food items that they bring. So you have the situation where even some schools are supplied with expired food items, or wholesome food items. And I can give many examples.
Well, it has happened, but I don't think it is something
quantity
that
and
is...
the quality of the food. Many headmasters have complained. Charles has spoken about it. Nagrat has spoken about it. And so the arrangements in terms of the dietary needs of the students need to be looked at.
Right.
And you also talk about the teaching and non-teaching staff. Those who teach the core subjects, the managers of the schools, the headmaster, assistant headmaster, house mistress, and the non-teaching staff. Since the advent of COVID, the only time they got a break was when schools were shut down for 10 months. They have never had a break. Because anytime one color is leaving, the other color is coming. And that has worn them down, physically and emotionally. It's an issue for a lot of teachers in the secondary sector. I mean, we can speak about the issues to do with even the textbooks. The program is supposed to cover core textbooks, which constitute part of the definition of free. Library fees, textbooks, examination fees. But as we speak, not every student has the complement of a core textbook per core subject. Students are sharing 2-to-1, sometimes 3-to-1 core textbook. So all these are issues that clearly
Finally,
preventing us from getting the full complement of the program.
Finally on free SHS, and I don't know whether we'd have the time to get into tertiary, because I feel we've even discussed a bit of it, because obviously if at the secondary level they are not up to scratch, and we push them on the fan belt.
Not all.
Definitely not all of them, but most of them.
Yes.
And if you push them on the fan belt, so we are basically pushing forward, and they get to university level, of course, the product there too will be affected. So that is clear. But are you disappointed that, very quickly on this one, are you disappointed that government, in terms of its financial status and deliberating on what to look at, did not review flagship programs, including free SHS? Are you disappointed by that? Do you feel there should have been a review in that, or on that tangent?
Honestly, I feel that there should have been a review. But my sense of a review in this case would not be to support a reduction in the resources allocated to the educational sector generally, and free senior high school particularly. And so, to some extent, I am happy that free senior high school was not placed on the chopping board to reduce the funding allocation. Because some of us believe, and given the issues I've narrated, a lot of that boils down to inadequate financial resources. So if we were to cut down the resources allocated to the free senior high school, it would have exacerbated some of these issues that I have narrated. But where I have a problem is the minister's proposal to wean off public tertiary institutions from the public payroll. Because I think that that proposal has serious implications. more directly, it sort of negates the reasoning behind the implementation of the free senior school policy. We say we are taking away fees because that is a barrier. So we've taken away fees. We say that has increased enrollments, and I have the figures. Now we are saying that because of the economic challenges that we face, we are looking at weaning off public tertiary institutions from the public payroll, which would mean the institutions would then have to find ways of generating enough resources to keep themselves functional so that they can fulfill their obligations. Where are they going to get the money from? They would have to charge the students. And they will have to charge them what economists will tell you, realistic and market-based rates. If, as we speak, students in tertiary institutions are struggling to pay current fees, how do we expect them to be able to pay fees that are going to go up 10, 15 times if this proposal becomes policy? So indirectly, we say we have opened the gates for you to get free secondary education, but we are closing the gate for you to access tertiary education. Does it make sense? I think there is policy inconsistency, and indeed, it defeats even the constitutional right. If you look at chapter 5, Article 25, where it talks about educational rights, it talks about the need to even work towards making tertiary education free. The president himself said it, that his government was thinking about potentially making tertiary education free. He didn't just say it in Ghana. He attended the Global Education Summit in the UK.
Let me ask you very quickly. So all of these are facts. If you had to deliver, let's say, a verdict on free SHS and rate it from 1 to 10, what score would you give it?
I would probably give it 4.
4 out of 10?
4 out of 10.
That would be your final answer?
Yes.
Final answer?
4.
Kwata.
I think I'm even being generous.
Quick reaction. I know you have a bit of a reaction.
Professor Adair Mensah.
Right.
Adair Mensah also gave 4.
Are you giving 4 because Adair Mensah?
No, but I agree with him. But there are those of our colleagues who think that we should even be giving 2.
Wow.
Yes.
So your actual score is a 2 out of 10?
Well, I say I'm giving 4, but others think that it should be 2 out of 10.
All right. Quick reactions. I want us to talk briefly about the e-levy to have the conversation.
So I think if I was president, I'll push that alumni also support the educational system. And I'm coming from my experience elsewhere where the alumni is really strong in terms of their support to their schools. And I think that if the likes of Setepe or even Ken Ofori-Atta should support their alma mater, you can imagine what can happen. I mean, if you should support your alma mater with, $100,000, I mean, which some of our alumni can. I'm talking of the likes of those who have even gone outside the country. And I'll use this platform to plead that it's never too late as an alumni to bequeath something to your past school. And that chest will really go towards, directly impacting people's lives. So I'm throwing in a challenge that alumni, who went to Ebiri Girls, who went to St. Rose's, go back to the school, help with one classroom, help with the feeding, do something. And society demands that of us. So that is my